I'm wild and free and young, I'm studying your shoes. But I wanna know your tongue, okay wait, let me translate. Yo quiero hacer el amor contigo, quieres casarte conmigo. ¿Cuál es tu problema? Sé que me amas. Si me ves llorando es porque no nos estamos besando. Me estás matando, won't you believe in us?
Hey Genderqueer Chat, it's Cole here. I just wanted to apologize for not making a video last week. My girlfriend was actually in the hospital, in the ER, so I was kind of busy with that. But I really love this channel, and I know that maybe we had a little bit of a lull last week. A lot of people had some personal issues come up, including myself. So again, I apologize for not being able to post a video and not getting a sub. This week's topic is really interesting. It's kind of about how sexual orientation and gender identity intersect. And this is brought up by a viewer who sent a really long and intricate message about their own gender identity and sexual orientation, and how they feel, more like a lesbian identified man because of their gender identity rather than a heterosexual man. I think that's really interesting and cool, because I myself have intersecting gender identity and sexual orientation issues also. So I guess to start out, I'll talk about how I identify, which is a genderqueer panromantic. Now, genderqueer, of course, everyone that watches this channel knows what that means. And for me, I identify more as gender neutral, kind of something other than the typical. And also, the viewer also sent us a quiz to take, which I took, and I will share that information with you later because I thought it was really interesting, my results, and I thought it made a lot of sense. But basically, the way that my gender identity has affected my sexual orientation is significant. Before coming out as genderqueer, I found myself being mostly, and this is actually still true, so either way, I am mostly and more physically interested and emotionally and romantically interested in cisgendered women. But I've also always been attracted to cisgendered men. Now, my interaction with my sexual and romantic interaction with cisgendered men is limited. But before I went to college, back in high school, I dated quite a few men or boys. And my problem was pretty much the same as Jack's and the same as our viewer. My issue is that the cisgendered men that I've tried to date only saw me as female. So in a sexual situation or romantic situation, I was put into a specific role that I was uncomfortable in. And that didn't make sense for me, and it made it unnatural, and it made it feel awkward. And so from that experience, when I started interacting sexually and romantically with cisgendered women, it was so incredibly easy for me to do. And I didn't feel as trapped by the binary in that sense. Even when I was identifying as a lesbian, I still didn't feel as trapped by the binary. But as I came out as genderqueer, I realized that I had the same problem with lesbians that I did with cisgendered men, which is trying to only seeing me as female and only wanting me to express myself in certain ways. And that just does not work for me, regardless. So, kind of from there, I decided, am I really a lesbian? If I don't identify as female, and if when with a lesbian I feel, it just doesn't feel like the right kind of relationship for me. It doesn't feel natural. As I started coming out as genderqueer, I realized that things were really more on a scale than, for me. And that although I am more overwhelmingly attracted romantically and physically to cisgendered women, that I can be open to other kinds of relationships as well, because my gender identity is more fluid than that. I think that I would never at this point rule someone out because of their gender, ever. I also have had crushes on other genderqueer and androgynous people as well, maybe 1 or 2 on the channel. And so I think that for me, sexuality is more fluid than for a lot of people. And I think that's because it really has a lot to do with how I identify gender-wise. I think that if I were a cisgendered man, that I wouldn't be as open to the idea of this queer interaction. And for me, it would be. Every interaction I have is queer. I mean, since I don't identify as either gender, every single interaction I have is somewhat queer. And I'm okay with that. So I just go with connections and with chemistry. And if that's not there, it's not going to happen for me. Even if I'm attracted to someone, if I don't have a connection and chemistry with them, the attraction doesn't matter. So I'm going to talk about this test I took. It was a sex test. Sex, not like as in sexual, but sex, your gender, sex. And my score was 60.8 out of 100 on the male side, 67.5 out of 100 on the female, and 63.3 on androgynous. So I'm pretty much the same on everything, which makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm a little higher on the female side of things. And I think my brain is a little more, and I think that's a lot to do with the fact that I have estrogen. And I'm very sensitive. So even if I had a penis, I think I would still be extremely sensitive. And I think that's why I get a lot of female points. But I think it's funny that they're pretty much the same on all of them. And that, like I said, to me, that makes sense because I identify as gender neutral. So it makes sense that I would pretty much get the same in every area or box. So, I mean, I think that sexual orientation and gender are separate, but I think that for me, they've really intersected and interacted a lot. And my thoughts, me thinking about gender this much and me deconstructing myself this much, you know, in terms of gender, has just made it easier to be able to say, you know, if I am this fluid with my gender identity, why wouldn't I be more fluid in my sexual orientation? And the answer to that is that I am. The answer is that I would never rule someone out based on gender. And so I think for anyone that is coming into their gender identity and maybe questioning their sexuality because of that, let me just say that I've been there, and I still haven't completely figured everything out, and it's going to take me a while to be able to do that. You know, you have to have the experience to be able to determine things like that. So right now, pan-romantic genderqueer works for me. That way I'm open to all sorts of interactions, but I'm not required, you know, to interact with anybody in a certain way. So yeah, just keep in mind that things work on more of a spectrum and a scale rather than, you know, you have to be this or you have to be that. You know, just think of things in a more fluid way. And I think that if everyone were to do that, that this world would be a much more accepting and beautiful place. All right, you guys, I'll see you next week.